My husband handed me the divorce papers and said, I'm giving you 24 hours to get out. My new woman will be living here. He expected me to cry, expected me to beg, but he was dead wrong. I just looked him straight in the eye and smiled. They had no idea. The cold marble floor met Orion's bare feet. He stepped into the sprawling living room. That morning, the bright sunlight fought to push through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but the expensive, heavy curtains blocked its path, keeping the interior dim and cool. This house was always cool, a luxury Orion prided himself on, a symbol of the status he had worked so hard to earn, or so he thought. In a corner of the room, by a slightly cracked window, stood his wife, Cassia. She was watering her beloved Phalaenopsis orchids. The simple beige sundress she wore was a stark contrast to the opulent interior, which was dominated by tones of gold and black. She looked so small in that enormous house, so simple, and that was precisely what irritated Orion the most. He felt he had completely outgrown her. He was a successful chief financial officer. Cassia, on the other hand, was just a quiet wife whose hobby was gardening. Orion stopped a few feet from her. He didn't call her by name. He just cleared his throat, a dry, authoritative sound. Without turning, Cassia tilted her head slightly. A sign that she was listening. I've made a decision, Orion said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, as if he were discussing a financial report at the office. Cassia set the small watering can on a nearby marble side table. She turned slowly. Her face was serene, her eyes clear. There was no fear in them, only an unnerving stillness. Orion savored the moment. He had imagined this scene for weeks. Cassia, crying on her knees, begging him not to leave her. He pictured how coldly he would reject her pleas. He would hand her a small settlement and feel like a king shedding dead weight. From the pocket of his impeccable suit pants, Orion pulled a thick white envelope. He didn't hand it to her, he tossed it onto the glass coffee table that separated them. The envelope slid across the surface and stopped precariously at the edge. Those are the divorce papers, Orion said. Cassia glanced at the envelope once, then looked back at Orion. Still no tears, just an infuriating silence. I'm giving you 24 hours, Orion continued, a hint of cruelty in his voice that he enjoyed. Pack your things and get out of here. My new woman, Lorelei, is moving into this house tomorrow. He crossed his arms. The jacket of his expensive suit tightened across his chest. He expected an explosion, hysterical, crying, insults, rage, anything. Cassia looked into her husband's eyes, the man she had been married to for 8 years, the man she thought she knew, and who clearly didn't know her at all. Then, something unexpected happened, something that made Orion's blood run a little cold. Cassia's lips slowly curved upward. It wasn't a sad, forced smile, nor was it the hysterical laugh of someone on the verge of a breakdown. It was a calm, genuine, light smile, as if he had just told her that the package she was expecting had arrived. All right, Orion, Cassia said. Her voice was smooth, without a hint of a tremor. Orion was stunned. What did you say? I said, all right, Cassia repeated. She took a few small steps forward and picked up the envelope from the table. She held it casually in one hand without even opening it. 24 hours. Starting now. This calm was wrong. Everything was wrong. Orion felt his control of the situation slipping away. He had come as a conqueror to end an era with a victory, not to be met with a smile. You're not angry? He asked, his voice losing some of its arrogance. Angry? Cassia seemed to consider it for a moment. No. To be honest, I'm a little relieved. I feel like a weight has been lifted. A weight? Orion scoffed, trying to regain his footing. What weight? The weight of living in the lap of luxury in my house? Of using my credit cards? The only one carrying any weight around here has been me. The weight of a wife who can't keep up with my world. Cassia just nodded silently. The smile never left her face. You're right. It must have been very hard for you. Thank you for freeing me from all this. Orion grunted. He didn't like this. He wanted to hurt her, but his words weren't landing. The woman before him was not the fragile creature he thought he had married. Or perhaps he had just never bothered to truly look at her. Lorelei is so much better than you, Orion tried, aiming for a more personal attack. She's beautiful, passionate, and she understands my world. She deserves all of this, don't you think? I'm sure she does, Cassia replied softly. I hope you'll both be very happy here. This was insane. Orion felt like he was arguing with a smiling wall. He pointed toward the door. Pack your bags. I don't want to see your face when I get back from work. I'll be staying at a hotel with Lorelai tonight. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, and I expect you to be gone by then. If not, I'll have security drag you out. That won't be necessary, Cassia said. I'll be gone before 9. Orion gave her one last look, searching for any sign of a crack in her composure. He found none. Just that terrible serenity. He huffed, feeling defeated in a battle he should have won. He turned and walked away. The echo of his dress shoes clicked on the marble floor. The front door slammed shut, the vibration felt throughout the house. Cassia was left alone in the silent living room. The smile vanished from her face, replaced by an expression of cold focus. She set the divorce papers on the table next to the watering can. She looked around at the magnificent house Orion was so proud of. The house Orion thought he had bought with his massive salary. The house Orion didn't know had been paid for in full by a trust fund in Cassia's name. 24 hours, Cassia whispered to herself. She glanced at the elegant wall clock. 9 a.m. More than enough time. She didn't go to her bedroom to cry. She went to the third-floor office, a place Orion had always dismissed as her space for silly hobbies. Cassia sat down in front of a state-of-the-art computer. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. The plan had been in place for a long time, a contingency plan for the day her patience ran out, or Orion finally showed his true colors. Today was that day. And Orion, in his arrogance, had just lit the fuse. A small smile returned to her lips. It was not a smile of triumph, it was the smile of a master strategist whose chess pieces had just moved into the exact desired position. Orion thought he was the king. He had forgotten that in this game, it's the queen who controls the board. For the rest of the day, Cassia moved with methodical purpose. She did not cry. There was no time for grief, only for efficiency. She pulled a medium-sized suitcase from the storage closet. It wasn't one of the expensive designer luggage sets Orion had bought her for appearances. It was a simple but sturdy canvas bag she'd had since before they were married. She went into the master bedroom. The room was a cavernous space with a king-sized bed and a walk-in closet the size of a small apartment. Here began the greatest irony. Orion had always mocked Cassia's sense of style. He bought her expensive dresses and flashy jewelry, forcing her to wear things that made her feel like she was in a costume. Cassia had never liked any of it. She opened the massive closet. On one side hung the expensive garments chosen by Orion. On the other, her own modest collection, a few cotton dresses, comfortable blouses, and her practical assortment of scarves. Cassia only took her simple clothes, folding them neatly into the suitcase. She left behind all the designer gowns, the leather handbags, and the painful high heels. Where she was going, she wouldn't need them. Her phone buzzed. It was Orion. Cassia let it ring until it stopped. A moment later, a text came through. Lorelai is excited to remodel your closet. Says you have awful taste. Cassia smiled faintly. Remodel. A good idea. The next task was more critical. She went to her third-floor office. This was her domain. Orion rarely entered. He found it boring, filled with books and what he called weird computer gadgets. He didn't know that behind a false wall that looked like a bookshelf was a top-of-the-line biometric safe. Cassia scanned her fingerprint and her iris. The safe swung open without a sound. Inside, there were no jewels or cash. There were documents. The real treasure. She pulled out several thick folders. The first contained the original deed to the house, in her name. Cassia Hawthorne, purchased and paid for in full with the inheritance from her father, a man Orion had dismissed as a poor old man before they married. The second folder contained the incorporation documents for the very company where Orion worked. It showed the anonymous majority shareholders, represented by a holding company that Cassia controlled completely. Orion, the arrogant CFO, was merely an employee whose position had been granted to him by the woman he had just thrown out. She also took an encrypted work laptop, several external hard drives, and a small notebook filled with access codes. All of it went into a plain-looking laptop bag. The suitcase with her clothes and the bag with her power. It was all she needed. In the afternoon, as Cassia was packing a few of her most beloved potted orchids to take with her, the doorbell rang. Cassia looked at the intercom screen. It was Orion, with a woman draped on his arm. Lorelai. Cassia sighed. This, she hadn't expected. Orion had said he wouldn't be back until tomorrow. Apparently, they had come to enjoy the show. Cassia opened the door. Orion was smirking. Lorelai, with brassy blonde hair and heavy makeup, looked her up and down with contempt. She wore a dress that was deliberately provocative. Well, well. Still here, Orion said. You said I had 24 hours, didn't you? Cassia replied calmly. I know, but Lorelei wanted to see her new house. We came to take some measurements for the new furniture, right, babe? Orion kissed Lorelei on the cheek. Lorelei let out a high-pitched laugh. Yes, and I also wanted to watch the part where they kick the boring old hag out. You've only packed one suitcase? How pathetic. Lorelei sashayed inside. Orion followed. They walked past Cassia as if she were a piece of furniture. Wow. This house is so much bigger than I thought. Lorelei exclaimed. I'm changing all these curtains. They're as depressing as the old owner. Cassia silently placed her last orchid pot in a box. Ugh, are you taking those ugly flowers with you? Lorelei sneered. Orion, honey, we're going to have a garden of imported roses, right? Whatever you want, Lorelei, Orion said, his eyes fixed on Cassia, savoring every moment of this humiliation. Cassia ignored them. She carried the box of plants and the suitcase near the front door. She carefully placed the laptop bag on top of the suitcase. That's it? Orion laughed out loud. 8 years of marriage to me, and that's all you're taking? A bag of cheap clothes and some wilted plants. I really did marry a woman of no value. Cassia finally looked at him. These things have value to me. Unlike everything else in this house. Lorelei stepped closer to Cassia. She was a few inches taller thanks to her heels. Look. Stop playing the victim. You lost. I won. Now get out of my palace. It's not your palace yet, Cassia said quietly. Oh, we'll see about that. Lorelei turned to Orion. Babe, I want the third-floor office, the one with the big windows as my makeup studio. Orion's smirk faltered slightly. He remembered something Cassia's office. At hearing this, Cassia paused. She turned back to look at them. The same faint smile from that morning reappeared. Go right ahead, she said. Orion felt uneasy. What do you mean? That room, Cassia gestured toward the stairs. Use it however you like. But I should warn you. It has a rather unique security system. A little different from the rest of the house. Lorelei rolled her eyes. Ooh, scary. What's the security system? A mousetrap? No, Cassia said. It's just that room is very valuable to me. I'm leaving now. Cassia took the handle of her suitcase and the laptop bag. She opened the front door. The warm evening air greeted her. Wait, Orion said. He strode quickly to Cassia and snatched the house keys from her hand. These are mine now. Cassia offered no resistance. She let him take them. Thank you for reminding me, she said. And then she looked Orion directly in the eye. Take good care of this house, Orion. Especially the third-floor office. As I said, it's very valuable. Just get out. Orion yelled, suddenly feeling threatened by her calm. And you, Miss Street Claire, Cassia turned her head toward the other woman. Make sure you're truly prepared to deal with the consequences of everything you've won today. What's that? A threat? Lorelei laughed. No. Just a piece of advice. Cassia turned and walked out. She walked down the long driveway. She didn't look back. There was no need. Orion and Lorelei stood in the doorway, watching her go. What a weirdo, Lorelei muttered. Come on, honey, show me our master bedroom. I want to tear up all her old sheets. Orion nodded, but his eyes were still fixed on Cassia's disappearing figure. The warning about the office echoed in his mind. Whatever, he thought. It's just the empty threats of a defeated woman. He slammed the door shut, locking the old world out. He didn't know he had just locked himself inside a cage of his own making. At the end of the street, a discreet black sedan pulled up. Cassia opened the door and slid in. The driver, a neat, middle-aged man, nodded. Everything is ready, Miss Hawthorne. Everything is ready, Silas, Cassia replied, fastening her seatbelt. Let's begin. The car glided away silently, leaving the house that, in a matter of hours, would become the epicenter of an earthquake. She's finally gone. Lorelei shrieked, her voice echoing in the now cavernous living room. She jumped into Orion's arms, wrapping her legs around his waist. We did it, baby. This palace is all ours. Orion laughed, the unease from Cassia's serene smile finally fading. He held Lorelei tightly. Of course it's ours. It's yours. He set her down and looked at her. The boring wife is gone. Let the party begin. Orion pulled out his phone. He'd planned for this. He called the most expensive caterer in the city. Yes, this is Orion Roads. Send everything over now. The full celebration package. Wagyu steaks, Maine lobster, and all your best desserts. And bring your most expensive champagne. Yes, immediately. While they waited, Lorelai ran through the house like a child in a toy store. She touched the textured walls, prodded the expensive porcelain vases, and kicked at the Persian rugs. This all has to go, she declared, pointing at the heavy curtains. They're as dull as her face. I want rose gold. And this couch is disgusting, so old-fashioned. We'll get white leather sectionals and change that chandelier. Orion smiled and nodded at every one of Lorelai's demands. This was the woman he wanted, one who knew how to spend money, who looked expensive, and who validated his success. Not like Cassia, who preferred planting flowers and reading books. Oh. Lorelai stopped suddenly at the foot of the stairs, her eyes gleaming. The third-floor office. The one with the big windows. I want it for my makeup studio. Let's go see it now. Orion's heart skipped a beat. Let's go later, babe. The catering will be here soon. Why don't we relax in the master bedroom first? You said you wanted to tear up the sheets. Lorelai pouted, her pretty face instantly souring. Why? Why later? Are you still thinking about what that woman said? She crossed her arms. Are you scared of her stupid bluff about a security system? Don't tell me you still care about her. That's not it, Lorelai, Orion quickly denied. He couldn't stand it when Lorelai was angry. Of course I'm not scared. It's ridiculous. Come on, I'll open the door for you right now. Let's go throw out all her valuable treasures. To prove his point, Orion took the stairs two at a time. Lorelai followed with a triumphant smirk. They reached the solid wooden door of the office. It looked ordinary, nothing special. See? Just a wooden door, Orion said arrogantly. He took out the house keys he had taken from Cassia. He inserted the key into the lock, turned it, but the door didn't open. What's taking so long? Lorelai whined, tapping her stiletto-clad foot. Hold on, it must be stuck, Orion said. He jiggled the key, but the door remained firmly shut. Lorelai huffed impatiently. Let me. She pushed Orion aside and grabbed the doorknob. Maybe you just have to pull. Lorelai, wait, too late. Lorelai yanked the doorknob with all her strength. In the next instant, the entire house was engulfed in sound. It wasn't a normal burglar alarm. It was a deafening industrial siren, a high-frequency shriek that seemed to penetrate bone. Orion and Lorelai screamed instantly, clamping their hands over their ears. The pain was unbearable. Turn it off. Turn it off. Lorelai shrieked over the noise. Panicked, Orion scrambled downstairs to the house security panel near the front door. He punched in the master code. The panel didn't respond. He tried again. Failed. The panel's screen went completely dark. What is this? Orion yelled, his voice barely audible. He tried calling the security company, glanced at his phone screen, and saw no signal. Not a single bar. He ran to a window, trying to find service. It was useless. Just then, as the siren hit its peak, all the lights in the house began to flicker frantically, like something out of a horror movie. Once, twice, and then total darkness. A complete blackout. The siren, which seemed to have its own backup power source, howled for another 30 seconds in the pitch black, the longest 30 seconds of their lives, and then it abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. The house was dead. The darkness was so thick Orion couldn't see his own hand in front of his face. The heavy curtains Lorelai had complained about now acted like the lid of a tomb, blocking even the slightest sliver of outside light. Orion? Orion, where are you? Lorelai's terrified voice came from upstairs. I'm here. Don't move. I'll find a flashlight. Orion fumbled along the wall, feeling his way toward a kitchen drawer he remembered. Suddenly, he heard the central air conditioning system power down. The luxurious coolness stopped instantly. The air inside the sealed house immediately became heavy and suffocating. In the darkness, Orion heard other voices, panicked footsteps, and frightened whispers. Sir? Mr. Rhodes? A flashlight from a smartphone cut through the dark from the dining area. It was the catering team. Their faces were pale. What's going on, sir? Asked the head of the team, a burly man. Is this house haunted? That alarm nearly made us deaf. We're leaving. No, Orion said, stumbling toward the light. It's just a short circuit. The panel must have a glitch. Please, don't go. Our food. We can't work in these conditions, sir, the man said firmly. My men are spooked. Just pay us, and we'll be on our way. Yes, of course, Orion said, relieved. At least this was a problem money could solve. He fumbled for his wallet. Here's my credit card. The catering boss took Orion's platinum card. He pulled a portable terminal from his pocket. The terminal glowed to life on its own battery. He swiped the card. The man frowned. He swiped it again. What's wrong? Orion asked nervously. Declined, sir, the man said. What? That's impossible. It's the corporate director's card. It has no limit. Try again. The man swiped it 3 more times. Still declined, sir. It says transaction not authorized. Lorelei, who had groped her way downstairs, heard the conversation. Use another card, you idiot, she snapped at Orion. Orion's face flushed with embarrassment. He pulled out another gold card. Try this one. The man swiped it. Declined. Here, try my debit card. Orion handed over his main debit card. The man inserted the card into the machine. PIN, sir. Orion punched in the PIN with trembling fingers. The machine beeped. The man looked at Orion with suspicion. Sir, this one says insufficient funds. Impossible. Orion shouted. I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in that account. Your machine must be broken. My machine is working perfectly, sir. The catering boss's voice turned cold. He and his men exchanged glances. I think you're trying to scam us. I'm not scamming you. We're leaving. And we're taking all the food with us. The team began gathering the boxes of food in the dark. Wait, don't do that. Lorelei shrieked, trying to grab a box. Don't touch that, the man said, slapping Lorelei's hand away. You haven't paid for it. I'll be reporting this as fraud, Mr. Rhodes. Have a nice night in your dark house. With a string of curses, the catering team left, taking the food and the only source of light with them. They left Orion and Lorelei once again in complete darkness. The silence fell again, heavy and hot. Sweat was beginning to soak Orion's expensive shirt. Orion. Lorelei's voice trembled. It was no longer anger, it was fear. Why? Why were your cards declined? Orion had no answer. He fumbled for his phone and held it up. Still no service. No way to check his bank account. No way to call anyone. Suddenly, Lorelei started screaming. Sharp, furious screams. What is happening? Why were your cards declined? What kind of house is this? This is all your fault. She started pounding on Orion's chest in the dark. Orion tried to grab her hands, but he could only stand there, stunned. An icy dread crept up his spine. He wasn't afraid of the dark, he wasn't afraid of Lorelei. He was afraid of only one thing. The image of Cassia's face forming in his mind, her calm face, her serene figure, and that faint smile. Take good care of that office. He realized, with a nauseating lurch, that this was not an accident. This wasn't a short circuit. This was an execution. And he had just willingly walked into the trap. That night was the longest hell Orion had ever experienced. The luxurious house, once the symbol of his status, became a hot, sealed prison. Without electricity, the central air conditioning was dead. The air inside the hermetically sealed and acoustically insulated home became suffocating and hot within hours. Sweat soaked their expensive clothes and clung unpleasantly to their skin. The house's water system relied on an electric pump. That meant no flushing toilets. No running faucets. They couldn't shower or even wash their faces. Luxury had turned to squalor in an instant. The floor-to-ceiling windows, designed for security, were locked tight and could only be opened electronically. They became glass panels, sealing them inside like specimens in a jar. The first to break down was Lorelei. After hours of screaming, crying, and blaming Orion, she finally collapsed in exhaustion on the sticky living room sofa. Her expensive makeup had run, leaving black streaks on her tear and sweat-stained cheeks. Her party dress was ripped at the side. She no longer looked like a queen, she looked desperate. Orion, on the other hand, spent the night pacing in a state of mounting panic. He discovered one spot near the kitchen window where, if he held his phone up just right, he could get one faint bar of signal. It wasn't enough to make a call, but it was just enough for his banking app to load endlessly. Connection failed. Timed out. Unable to retrieve data. Every failure message was like a punch to the gut. He couldn't access his money. His entire fortune, his very identity, had vanished overnight. His mind raced. Was this a cyber attack? Had his accounts been hacked? But the alarm on the office. That was too specific. It had to be connected to Cassia. But how? How could that quiet woman, with her gardening hobby, have orchestrated something like this? When the pale light of dawn began to filter through the thick curtains, illuminating the room in a dim, gray glow, Orion and Lorelei were in a wretched state. They smelled, they were sticky, and they were desperate. Then, the doorbell rang. The sound was so normal, so mundane, that they both jumped. Orion scrambled up from the floor where he had been sitting. Hope swelled in his chest. It had to be a security guard or an electrician he'd finally managed to contact after hundreds of attempts. "Help is here," he croaked. He ran to the front door, worked the manual deadbolt with trembling hands, and pulled the door wide open. He squinted against the bright morning light. Standing on the doorstep was not a uniformed electrician. There were 3 men and 1 woman. All were dressed in dark, impeccable, expensive business suits. Their faces were serious, professional, and impassive. Behind them stood 2 security guards in stark black uniforms Orion didn't recognize as belonging to the local security company. They looked more like private bodyguards. The man who appeared to be the leader, tall with salt and pepper hair at his temples, looked Orion up and down. He took in Orion's wrinkled, sweat-stained clothes, his disheveled hair, and his panicked expression with a barely perceptible curl of his lip. "Good morning," the man said. His voice was cool and clipped. "We're from the asset management team at Solstice Capital." Orion was confused. His exhausted brain tried to process it. "Asset management? Thank God you're here. There's a major electrical problem in my house. Everything is shut down." An alarm went off. The man held up a hand, stopping Orion's panicked explanation. "Excuse me," the man said. "Who are you?" The question was so simple, so unexpected, it left Orion speechless. "What? What do you mean, who am I?" "I'm Orion Rhodes, the CFO of Innovatech Solutions. This is my house." The man slowly shook his head, as if speaking to a stubborn child. "I'm afraid you are mistaken, sir." He held up a tablet he was carrying, turning it toward Orion. The screen showed a photo of the house and a series of documents. "According to our records," the man continued, his monotone voice cutting through the morning air, "this property is corporate asset 001. This asset is assigned as the exclusive residence for the Chief Executive Officer of Innovatech, Miss Cassia Hawthorne." Orion's world seemed to tilt. The ground beneath his feet felt like it was shaking. "Chief Executive Officer?" he whispered, his throat dry. "Cassia? That can't be right. That's impossible. She's my wife. She doesn't work. She takes care of her plants at home." The man in the suit ignored Orion's emotional outburst. He continued as if reading a weather report. "We just received Miss Hawthorne's resignation from her position as CEO this morning, effective immediately. Simultaneously, Miss Hawthorne also instructed our asset management firm, which administers all Solstice Capital properties, to secure this property." Solstice Capital, Orion repeated the name. He'd heard it vaguely. A massive, mysterious holding company. "Miss Hawthorne has confirmed to us that she no longer resides here," the man continued. "Given that you are no longer the legal spouse of the registered resident, and the resident herself has vacated the premises, your presence is considered a legal occupation of the property." "Who the hell are you people?" A shrill voice cut through the air. Lorelei had come up behind Orion. She looked even more frightful, clutching a sweaty t-shirt she'd borrowed from Orion. "What are you doing here? Get out of our house," she shrieked. "Orion. Throw them out. Call the police." The man in the suit turned his cold gaze to Lorelei. "And you, Miss Lorelei Street Clare, if I'm not mistaken," he consulted his tablet for a moment. "You are not registered to this property in any capacity. Your current status is that of a trespasser." "Trespasser?" Lorelei gasped. The man gave a short nod to the 2 guards behind him. The guards stepped forward, flanking the doorway. "You two," the man said, looking now between Orion and Lorelei, "have exactly 1 hour 60 minutes to collect any personal effects you can carry in your hands and vacate the premises. If you refuse, we are authorized to have you forcibly removed." "Personal effects?" Orion laughed, a sound that bordered on insane. "Everything in this house is mine. The cars in the garage, the furniture, I bought it all. We have records for that as well," Mr. Rhodes, the woman in the suit spoke for the first time. All furnishings, vehicles, and electronics in this residence are registered as company property, part of the CEO's amenities package. Like his salary. Orion felt his legs give way. My salary. Wait a minute, he yelled, a final spark of hope igniting. You don't understand. Innovatech is my company. I'm a director, the CFO. You can't just throw out a director. The lead man looked at Orion for the first time, and a cold, faint smile touched his lips. Precisely, Mr. Rhodes, he said quietly. Your position as CFO is the next item we need to discuss. The man consulted his wristwatch. There is an emergency shareholders meeting at 10 a.m. The meeting has been called at the urgent request of the majority shareholder, Solstice Capital. He looked back at Orion. And you, Mr. Rhodes, are the sole item on the agenda. 1 hour. 60 minutes to summarize 8 years of a marriage into what they could carry. The reality was, Orion owned nothing. The expensive suits in the closet, the designer watches in the drawer, the imported leather shoes on the rack, all of it was company property. He and Lorelei were allowed to take only the clothes they were wearing and their now useless cell phones. The two guards in black uniforms watched them like hawks. They stood silently in the living room as Lorelei grew increasingly hysterical, throwing sofa cushions against the wall. This is robbery. I'm going to sue you. Orion did nothing. He sank onto the cold marble steps, his head in his hands. His brain reeled, trying to piece together the words from the man in the suit. CEO. Miss Cassia Hawthorne. Corporate asset. It had to be a nightmare, some absurd clerical error. His wife, Cassia, the CEO? Cassia, who spent her afternoons repotting plants. Cassia, who had never shown the slightest interest in board meetings or stock prices. It couldn't be. Time's up. The voice of the man from the suit, whose name turned out to be Mr. Caspian, jolted Orion from his thoughts. The guards moved forward. One took Orion by the arm, the other took Lorelei. They were not rough, but their grip was firm and non-negotiable. Get your filthy hands off me. I'll sue you. Lorelei shrieked. They were literally escorted out the grand front door. The hot, humid morning air hit them, feeling like a slap in the face. The door clicked shut behind them. It was over. They stood on the natural stone driveway in front of the tall, wrought iron gates. Orion's black Mercedes and Lorelei's red sports car, a gift from Orion, were parked inside the garage, now locked and unreachable. My car. Orion, my car is in there. Lorelei wailed, running to the gates and trying to shake them. Guard. Open the gate. That's my car. Mr. Caspian's face appeared on the intercom by the gate. Miss Street Claire, that vehicle was purchased with company funds that are currently under investigation. It has been impounded as evidence. Have a good day. The intercom screen went dark. Lorelei whirled on Orion, her eyes blazing. Orion, this is all your fault. What happened? Why did you let this happen? You said you were rich. You said you were a director. I am a director. Orion yelled, his voice cracking. He tugged at the collar of his sticky shirt. This has to be a mistake. I'll go to the office. I'll fix this. Cassia must have lost her mind. She's conspiring with someone to rob me. They started walking. There was no other choice. They walked through the quiet streets of the exclusive, gated community. The guard at the main gatehouse didn't even glance at them as they passed on foot. Other residents, out for their morning jogs or driving their luxury cars, stared at the disheveled-looking couple with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. Lorelei in her torn silk pajamas and Orion in his wrinkled suit, reeking of sweat. It was the longest walk of shame of their lives. Lorelei never stopped complaining, blaming, and crying. Orion no longer heard her. His mind was focused on the 10 a.m. meeting. That meeting was the key. He would get in there and demand an explanation. He would call his lawyers. He didn't know what he would do. After nearly 30 minutes of walking, they finally reached the main road. They managed to hail a cab. Lorelei paid with a few crumpled dollar bills she pulled from her pajama pocket, cash she kept for an emergency. Apparently, the emergency had arrived. To the Innovatech building. Fast, Orion snapped at the driver. The ride to the office was torture. Orion stared at the passing buildings. Everything looked normal, but his world had been turned upside down. He kept trying to power on his phone, hoping the signal would return, that the banking app would work, but it remained dead. They arrived at the towering glass lobby of Innovatech Solutions at 9:45 a.m. Orion's face was pale and greasy. His hair was a mess. Lorelei looked even worse. Ignoring the shocked stares of arriving employees, Orion marched straight to the security turnstiles. He swiped his director-level access card. Beep. A red light. Access denied. Orion froze. He tried again. Beep. Access denied. Is there a problem, Mr. Rhodes? Orion turned to see the young receptionist, a girl named Thea, looking at him with a mixture of pity and fear. My card must be malfunctioning, Orion said, trying to keep his voice steady. Buzz me through. I have an urgent board meeting at 10. What meeting? Lorelei pushed forward. This is Director Orion Rhodes. Open the gate. Or you're fired. Thea shrank back, frightened. I'm sorry, Mr. Rhodes, but my system says your card has been deactivated. I can't. What do you mean, deactivated? Orion slammed his hand on the counter. I pay your salary. Get the head of security on the phone, now. That won't be necessary, Mr. Rhodes. A calm voice sounded behind them. Orion and Lorelei turned. Standing there was a man Orion vaguely recognized, a middle-aged man he'd sometimes seen in the executive parking garage. He thought he was one of the board's drivers. But today, the man wasn't wearing a driver's uniform. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than Orion's monthly salary. He looked authoritative and cold. It's Mr. Kincaid. They're waiting for you in the boardroom, Silas Kincaid said. His eyes flickered briefly to Lorelei. Just Mr. Rhodes. This lady is not invited. You're coming with me, Lorelei grabbed Orion's arm. Where Orion goes, I go. Silas Kincaid looked at Orion. If you want to make matters worse, bring her. But I advise against it. Orion swallowed hard. There was something in Silas Kincaid's gaze that terrified him. He turned to Lorelei. Wait here, he said firmly. Don't make another scene. I'll handle this. Lorelei opened her mouth to protest, but the look of desperation in Orion's eyes stopped her. She nodded and sat on a lobby couch, arms crossed angrily, in full view of everyone. This way, Silas Kincaid said. He didn't lead Orion to the employee elevators. He led him to a private, brass-trimmed elevator in a corner of the lobby. An elevator Orion knew could only be accessed with the highest-level keycards. Silas Kincaid swiped his card, and the doors slid open. The ride to the top floor, to the boardroom, was the most agonizing silence. Orion wanted to ask questions, but his throat was clamped shut. The elevator doors opened not into a lobby, but directly inside the massive boardroom. Orion stepped out, squinting to adjust to the room's dim lighting. The long, glossy mahogany table was already full. Every member of the board was there. Chairman Theron Wallace, Vice Chairman Lopez, the COO, all the faces he knew, and they were all staring at him, not with anger, but with something worse. Cold pity. They all saw his wrinkled clothes and his desperate face. Sorry, I'm late, Orion mumbled, stumbling toward his usual seat. Had some trouble at home. No one responded. Orion looked to the head of the table. The chairman's seat. The CEO's seat. It was empty. As usual, the anonymous CEO of Solstice Capital did not attend meetings. They were always represented by their lawyers. All right, Orion said, trying to seize control of the situation. What's going on? What is this emergency meeting? What issue is so important that you lock out your own CFO? He tried to laugh, but it came out as a croak. Then, the chair at the head of the table creaked. The tall, black leather chair slowly swiveled around. Orion expected to see the corporate lawyer. He expected to see an unfamiliar face. The face he saw stole the breath from his throat. There, perfectly calm, sat Cassia. Not in her cotton sundresses or simple scarves. She was wearing a dark, navy blue pantsuit, tailored to fit her perfectly. Beneath the jacket was a cream-colored silk blouse. Her hair was pulled back in an elegant, professional chignon, revealing her serene and focused face. She looked powerful. She looked like a queen. She was holding a tablet in her hand, and sitting beside her was the man who had thrown him out of his house that morning, Mr. Caspian. The entire room was silent. Orion could only stand and gape. Cassia looked up from her tablet and met Orion's eyes directly. Her gaze was cool, sharp, and devoid of all the softness it once held. Good morning, Director Rhodes, she said. Her voice was clear, calm, and slightly amplified by the room's audio system. It resonated with authority. Thank you for joining us. Though your attire is somewhat inappropriate. Several directors ducked their heads to hide their smirks. Please, take a seat, Cassia continued. We're about to begin the presentation on your financial audit. Orion couldn't move. He could only whisper. His voice was barely audible. Cassia? Cassia? Orion's voice trembled. It was more a moan of confusion than a question. What? What is all this? What kind of joke is this? He looked around at the other directors. Gentlemen, what's going on? Why is that woman sitting there? Lorelei, who had somehow managed to get past the frantic receptionist and up the next elevator, burst through the boardroom door, which hadn't been properly closed. Orion, what is? She stopped short. Her eyes locked on Cassia. She laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Cassia? You? The gardener? What are you doing in that chair? Did you sneak in? Security. No one moved. Silas Kincaid, standing near the door, simply gave Lorelei a cold look. Cassia sighed, as if interrupted by a minor pest. Mr. Kincaid, please escort this woman out. She has no business here. Don't you touch me. Lorelei shrieked. You don't give me orders. Orion, say something to this woman. But Orion said nothing. He was still staring at Cassia. An icy dread was crawling up his spine as the impossible pieces of the puzzle began to click into place. Cassia ignored Lorelei. She turned her attention back to the boardroom table. My apologies for the interruption. As I was saying, we are here for an emergency shareholders meeting. Mr. Caspian, please read the opening minutes. Mr. Caspian stood. This meeting has been called by Solstice Capital, owner of 90% of the shares of Innovatech Solutions. The purpose of this meeting is the removal and legal prosecution of the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Orion Rhodes. Orion flinched. 90%? That's impossible. Solstice only owned 60%. And you, he spat at Cassia, have no right to speak. Chairman Wallace, the most senior board member, finally spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment. Orion, calm yourself and show some respect. You are speaking to the owner of this company. The owner? Orion laughed bitterly. The owner is the anonymous CEO of Solstice Capital, some reclusive investor. Not this woman. Allow me to correct you. Cassia's voice cut in, calm, sharp, and authoritative. I am Cassia Hawthorne, the sole daughter of the late August Vance, founder of Solstice Capital. Orion froze. Vance. Cassia's father. The man he had always thought was some low-level civil servant who had died too young. The man whose only inheritance, Orion thought, was a small house in the suburbs they had long since sold. My father, Cassia continued, her eyes locked on Orion, preferred to live simply. He built Solstice Capital from the ground up, a holding company that now owns dozens of subsidiaries, including Innovatech. When he passed, he left everything to me. I am the sole owner. I am the anonymous CEO you have all been reporting to. The silence in the room was so thick Orion could hear his own heart pounding in his ears. That's a lie, Orion whispered. If that were true, why me? Why did you make me CFO? Cassia tilted her head slightly. A good question. 8 years ago, when we married, I was naive. I loved you. I thought you were ambitious and smart. I wanted you to feel like you were successful on your own merits. So, I placed you here. I gave you the title, the inflated salary, the house, a company asset I called our home. I thought that with my husband managing the finances, my investments would be safe. Cassia paused, her gaze hardening. I wanted us to build something together. I didn't realize you were busy building your own little kingdom on my back. Orion broke into a cold sweat. He gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. I allowed your arrogance, Cassia said. I allowed you to belittle me in our own home. I allowed you to mock my gardening hobby, while I was monitoring the stock markets from my office. I endured all your insults, thinking it was a small price to pay for a marriage. She stood and walked slowly toward the large screen at the end of the room. But there is one thing I cannot tolerate, Orion. Theft. This is slander, Orion shouted. You have no proof. Oh, but I do, Cassia said. I was a quiet wife, Orion. But I am also a very meticulous CEO. Did you really think I would put you in charge of the finances without any safeguards? That system in the third-floor office wasn't a simple alarm. It was my personal server, monitoring every transaction you made. Every single dollar. Mr. Kincaid, Cassia said. Silas Kincaid, who, it turned out, was the head of internal audit for all of Solstice Capital and Cassia's father's most trusted man, stepped forward and turned on the projector. The wall screen came to life. It was Orion's personal hell, laid bare for all to see. A complex flowchart showed funds being transferred from Innovatic to shell corporations, to offshore accounts, and back to domestic personal accounts under strawman names. These corporations, Mr. Kincaid explained in his monotone voice, were used by Mr. Rhodes to embezzle operating funds. Over the last 2 years, the total comes to $5.5 million, the board members gasped. Orion went ashen. $5.5 million, Chairman Wallace whispered, horrified. And what was the money spent on? Mr. Kincaid continued, changing the slide. The screen now showed a series of photographs. A picture of Lorelei posing in front of a red sports car, followed by a copy of the vehicle's purchase receipt, paid in full from one of the Shell accounts. Next slide, Orion and Lorelei on vacation in the Maldives, laughing in a luxury overwater bungalow, followed by the resort bill, paid from another Shell account. Next slide. A lease agreement for a luxury downtown apartment in Lorelei's name, paid for 5 years in advance. Lorelei, still in the doorway, saw her own pictures. Her face went pale. This woman here, Cassia spoke, her voice like ice, is not simply a new girlfriend. She is a very expensive accomplice. She has been happily enjoying the spoils of this company. Orion finally collapsed into a chair. He was done. It was all over. You knew all of this? He whispered to Cassia. For how long? Cassia returned to her seat. I've known about Miss Street Claire for 6 months. I've known about this embezzlement for over a year. I gathered the evidence, Orion. I waited. I gave you a chance to confess. Every day I hoped you would come home and be honest with me. But you never did. Yesterday, Cassia's voice softened fractionally, you gave me divorce papers. You gave me a 24-hour ultimatum. You thought you were shedding dead weight, but you had actually just signed your own confession. You freed me from my last shred of doubt. Orion looked at his wife, his ex-wife, the woman he had underestimated, the woman he had insulted, the woman who had apparently held his entire life in the palm of her hand. The board, Cassia's voice became firm again, voted unanimously this morning, an hour before your arrival. You, Orion Rhodes, are hereby terminated, with cause, from all your positions at Innovatech and all Solstice Capital subsidiaries. Fine. Fire me, I don't care. Orion yelled, a last act of desperate bravado. I'll leave with my money. Cassia looked at him with an almost pitying expression. Your money? Oh, Orion, don't you understand? Your credit cards, your bank accounts, they were all frozen by court order this morning. All of your assets, including what you stole, have been seized. Orion stared at her blankly. You're not just fired, Orion, Cassia said quietly. She pressed a button on the intercom panel on her desk. Security, please come in and collect our guest. The boardroom doors swung wide open. It wasn't the building guards. It was 2 uniformed police officers who entered, following Mr. Caspian. Orion's eyes widened in terror. The police? You called the police? Of course, Cassia said. This isn't a domestic dispute, Orion. This is corporate crime. One police officer approached Orion. Mr. Orion Rhodes, you are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. The other officer produced a pair of handcuffs. The metallic click echoed in the silent room. Orion looked at the handcuffs, then at Cassia. His face was pale, filled with terror. He finally realized his greatest mistake. He had not just betrayed his wife, he had tried to swindle the queen on her own throne, and he had just been checkmated. The click of the handcuffs locking around Orion's wrists sounded final. Louder than the slam of his front door, louder than the howling siren, it was the concluding sound of his entire life. He stood there, frozen. His wrinkled shirt now felt like scratchy burlap. Cold sweat soaked his back. He looked at Cassia. His eyes were not pleading for mercy, but for understanding. He still couldn't fathom how this had happened. Cassia, please, he rasped. Don't do this. This will ruin me. Think of our 8 years. Cassia looked at him, her expression almost blank. I have been thinking about them for the last year, Orion. I thought of those 8 years every time you lied to me. I thought of them every time you wired company money to your girlfriend's account. You destroyed those 8 years, not me. Lorelei, who had been standing like a statue in the doorway, finally snapped out of her shock. Fear overcame confusion. She saw the handcuffs on Orion. She saw the police. She saw Cassia's cold, powerful face. Her materialistic brain did the math quickly. Orion was finished. Orion was broke. Orion was going to prison. This meant she would get nothing but trouble. Her first instinct was to flee. I had nothing to do with this. I'm just his girlfriend. I didn't sign any papers. With unexpected speed, Lorelai turned and ran. Her heels clattered on the marble floor of the elevator lobby. She ran for the exit. Stop that woman. Cassia's voice was quiet, but commanding. Silas Kincaid, who had anticipated this, signaled to two plainclothes security guards who had been waiting outside the boardroom. Before Lorelai could reach the elevator, two large men blocked her path. Leave me alone. I had nothing to do with it. Lorelai shrieked, trying to push past them. I'm a victim. He tricked me. Orion Rhodes tricked me. She whirled back toward Orion. Her face was now contorted with rage and fear. You said you were rich. You said you were a director. You liar. You tricked me. Miss Street Claire. Cassia's voice rang out clearly from the boardroom. She had stepped out and was standing in the doorway, watching Lorelai struggle. It's interesting that you have suddenly become the victim. I am the victim. No. Cassia's voice cut through Lorelai's screams. You enjoyed goods purchased with stolen money. That makes you an accomplice. Cassia addressed the other police officer, the one not holding Orion. Officer, this woman is Lorelai Street Claire. As outlined in our evidence dossier, she is the direct beneficiary of the embezzled funds. The sports car, the luxury apartment, a lifestyle valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars. All paid for by Mr. Rhodes, with company money. Lorelai froze. That's a lie. He gave me gifts. Is it illegal for a man to give his girlfriend gifts? It is, miss, Mr. Caspian said, stepping forward with his tablet, when those gifts are the proceeds of crime. You were fully aware Mr. Rhodes had a wife. You knew the lifestyle you enjoyed far exceeded the official salary of a CFO. You never questioned it, you simply enjoyed it. The law has a name for that. Enjoying the proceeds of crime, money laundering. The blood drained from Lorelai's face. Money laundering. Prison. The words spun in her head. No, I didn't know anything. She wailed, changing tactics. Tears began to well in her eyes, the same crocodile tears she used to use to get what she wanted from Orion. I swear, I didn't know. I'm just a small-town girl who was dazzled by the big city. I believed everything he told me. He told me he was going through a painful divorce, that his wife was crazy. He swore all the money was from his bonuses and personal investments. I just believed him. Lorelai sang like a canary. She gave up details of the secret apartment, the account numbers she knew, the names of their vacation destinations. She laid bare every lie, big and small, that Orion had told her, twisting it all to make it seem like he was the manipulative mastermind and she was the innocent puppet. She was willing to testify against Orion at trial in exchange for immunity, or at least a much lighter sentence. The district attorney, seeing Lorelai's testimony as the final nail in the coffin, agreed. The trial was a public spectacle. The news of the powerhouse CEO who brought down her corrupt husband and his mistress dominated the national headlines. The courtroom was always packed. Cassia attended every day, not as the CEO, but as the key witness and primary victim. She sat there silently, her serene figure becoming an unexpected symbol of strength. The highlight of the trial was when Lorelai took the stand. She had dressed for the part in a simple white blouse and light makeup, trying to look innocent and repentant. Orion, now in a prison jumpsuit, looked gaunt and old. His once impeccably styled hair was now thin and dull. He stared at Lorelai with pure hatred. Miss Street Claire, the prosecutor began, can you tell the court how Mr. Rhodes convinced you to accept these expensive gifts? Lorelai started crying on cue. He said it was for our future. He said I deserved it. When I would ask where the money came from, he would get angry. He said I didn't trust him. He said it was men's business. I was scared. Liar. Orion leaped to his feet, his shackles rattling. You lying snake. You demanded everything. You were never scared. You were greedy. Silence. The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Rhodes, sit down. One more outburst and I'll have you removed from your own trial. Orion was forced to sit, his body trembling with rage. He had to listen as Lorelai painted a false picture of him as a monster and herself as a helpless victim. The very woman for whom he had thrown Cassia away was now the one destroying what was left of his defense. Cassia watched the scene from her seat. She saw the man she once loved, Orion, being torn apart by the woman he had chosen. She saw the woman who had insulted her fashion sense, Lorelai, now hiding behind a mask of innocence. It was a pathetic spectacle, a tragedy written by their own greed. The verdict was as expected. Orion Rhodes, the judge's voice boomed in the silent courtroom, based on the irrefutable evidence and witness testimony, this court finds you guilty on all counts. Embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. You abused the trust of your wife and your company. You have shown no remorse. This court sentences you to 20 years in prison and full restitution of the $5.5 million. Orion slumped in his seat. As for Miss Lorelei St. Clair, the judge continued, in light of your cooperation as a key witness, the court imposes a lighter sentence. 3 years of probation, mandatory reporting, and community service. All assets received as a product of this crime will be seized by the state. Lorelei cried. This time, they were tears of relief. 3 years of probation. She was free. She had lost everything, the car, the apartment, the jewelry, but she wasn't going to prison. All of Orion's remaining personal assets, which weren't much, as it turned out almost everything was in the company's name, were seized. Even the old inherited house he'd hidden from Cassia was auctioned off to pay the fines. He was left with nothing. His name was ruined. His ashamed family disowned him. He was alone. As they led a shackled Orion from the courtroom, his eyes met Cassia's one last time. There was no anger left in them, just a hollow emptiness and a late-dawning regret. Cassia simply gave a single, slow nod. A final goodbye. Outside the courthouse, Lorelei was mobbed by reporters. Miss St. Clair, do you have anything to say to Orion Rhodes? Lorelei dabbed a tear. I just hope he finds peace and repents for what he did to me and to Miss Hawthorne. She walked away, playing her final victim role. Across the street, meanwhile, Cassia slipped into a discreet black car driven by Silas Kincaid. The window rolled up, sealing her off from the chaos, and the car pulled away, leaving her past in the rearview mirror. Time is a healer and a builder. In the decade that followed that trial, time healed Cassia's old wounds and built a solid legacy. The name Solstice Capital was no longer a mysterious entity hiding in the shadows. Now, under the open and visible leadership of Cassia Hawthorne, the company had transformed. Cassia purged the company of the vestiges of Orion's era, instituting transparent, multi-tiered audit systems and a strict code of ethics. She led not just with her head, but with her heart, proving that ethical business was the most profitable kind. Under her guidance, Solstice Capital expanded into renewable energy and educational technology, enriching the company not just financially, but socially. Today, Cassia was presiding over a board meeting in the very room where Orion had been ruined, but the atmosphere was entirely different. The room seemed brighter now, the dark wood paneling balanced by bright, modern art. Chairman Wallace, now a senior advisor, nodded in approval as Cassia presented the latest quarterly report. As you can see, Cassia's voice was calm and confident. Our philanthropic division has successfully launched scholarship programs in 5 communities. This isn't just about corporate image, it's an investment in our country's human capital. Our profits are up 12%, and our social impact is up 20%. Silas Kincaid, now her official right hand, the chief operating officer, added. This is all due to our CEO's long-term vision. Our employees are loyal. The turnover rate is the lowest in the company's history. They're proud to work here. Cassia smiled, a genuine smile. Thank you, Silas. It's an excellent job by all our teams. There was no fear or intrigue in that room anymore. Only respect. Cassia had become the leader they admired, strong, fair, and compassionate. She was no longer the quiet woman watering her plants, though she did still love her Phalaenopsis orchids. She was now the queen who had built her kingdom not on the sands of arrogance, but on a foundation of solid ground. After the meeting, Cassia had a personal engagement. Silas Kincaid was waiting for her in the lobby with the same discreet black car. They didn't drive to a lavish penthouse or a hilltop villa. They drove to the old neighborhood, to the house that had been the silent witness to Orion's betrayal. When they arrived, the wrought iron gates swung open, but behind them was no longer a silent, sterile courtyard. The yard was now filled with the laughter of children. There were swing sets, a slide, and well-tended flower beds. The plaque next to the marble entryway had changed. It no longer read, "The Rhodes Residence." It now read the Hawthorne Haven, a place for protection and new beginnings. Cassia had turned that cold palace into a shelter for women and children who were victims of domestic violence. She walked inside. The interior was unrecognizable. The dark-paneled walls were painted in bright pastels. The living room, once filled with stiff, ostentatious furniture, was now a comfortable common space with large sofas, overflowing bookshelves, and a children's play area. A young woman teaching a small boy to read looked up and smiled. Miss Hawthorne, welcome. Hello, Cora, Cassia greeted warmly. How is our little Leo doing today? The boy ran and hugged Cassia's leg. Aunt Cassia, I can read cat now. Cassia laughed and ruffled his hair. You're so smart. Cassia walked through the place, greeting the residents. She knew all their names, listened to their stories. She was not just a donor, she was a mentor and a protector. She climbed the marble staircase to the third floor. She stopped at the door to her old office. The door was now wide open. There were no more terrifying alarms or hidden servers. The room had been transformed into a quiet art therapy room. Canvases filled the walls. Brushes and paints were neatly arranged. A therapist was guiding a painting session for several women. Here, where she had once monitored Orion's downfall, she now watched the process of healing for so many others. She had taken the poison of her past and turned it into an antidote for others. This serenity was her strength. She was no longer living in the shadow of a lie. She lived in the light of her own truth. Her serene figure was no longer the symbol of a quiet wife, but of a principled leader. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, outside a high-walled prison, a man walked out into the harsh sunlight. He was gaunt, his skin pale, his once jet-black hair now thin and a dull gray. He wore worn-out clothes given to him at the prison. In his hand, a brown envelope with a few $100s, his last paycheck from 10 years of work in the prison kitchen. It was Orion. He was free, having served half his sentence for good behavior. He stood at the gate, squinting. The world was alien and too loud. He walked aimlessly to the nearest bus station. He bought a ticket to the city with what little money he had, the city that was once his. He arrived in the city in the late afternoon. He was hungry, tired, and completely alone. He went into a small, run-down diner and ordered a combo plate. In a corner of the diner, an old tube television with a flickering picture was showing the evening news. Orion ate slowly, distractedly. Then a face appeared on the screen, a face that had haunted his every night for the last 10 years. It was Cassia, but a different Cassia. She looked radiant, confident, serene. She was being interviewed in front of a magnificent new building. The news anchor said, Solstice Capital CEO Cassia Hawthorne today opened the latest tuition-free children's hospital, funded entirely by her foundation. A true visionary, blending business success with social conscience. Orion froze. The fork trembled in his hand. He stared at the screen. He saw the woman he had called boring, the woman he had discarded, the woman who was now being hailed as a national hero. In the run-down diner, with its smell of stale oil and the buzz of flies, Orion looked at the screen. He saw Cassia's success. He saw his own lost success. He saw the life he had destroyed with his own 2 hands. The food in his mouth felt like sand. He couldn't swallow. The real terror had just begun. The real prison was out here. Orion pushed his plate away. He wasn't hungry anymore, just filled with a cold, gnawing emptiness. He paid and walked back out into the noisy streets. He had nowhere to go, no one to call. His family, shamed by the scandal he had caused, had disowned him years ago. He walked without purpose. The city had changed dramatically in 10 years. New skyscrapers soared, many of them bearing the silver SC logo of Solstice Capital. Cassia's company was everywhere, on city buses, on digital billboards, in the new city parks. It was as if the city itself were mocking him, flaunting all that could have been his. He walked until his feet blistered inside his worn-out shoes. Night began to fall, bringing a chill that cut to the bone. He had no place to sleep, not even enough money for the cheapest motel room. He was a ghost at his own city's party. His feet led him to a loud, grimy night market area. Blaring music mixed with the shouts of vendors. He looked for a place to sit down, just to rest his weary bones. He saw a crowded, cheap dive bar. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a shattering plate, followed by a loud curse. Useless. Look what you've done. You've dropped it all. The bar owner, a heavy-set, middle-aged man, yelled. Orion turned. He saw a waitress hastily kneeling, picking up shards of glass and scattered food from the dirty floor. I'm sorry, boss. I tripped. The waitress's voice trembled with fear. Sorry? You're sorry? Are you going to pay for this? You know how much these plates cost. I'm docking your pay again, the man yelled. Other customers looked on with a mixture of pity and disgust. Orion didn't care about the commotion until the waitress stood up and turned under the neon light. Time seemed to stop. Orion recognized that face. 10 years had etched cruel lines onto what was once a beautiful face. Her bright blonde hair was now dull and pulled into a messy bun. The heavy makeup she once prided herself on was replaced by cheap, sweat-streaked cosmetics. She wore a faded, ill-fitting orange t-shirt uniform, stained with sauce. It was Lorelei. Their gazes locked across the crowd. Orion's empty eyes met Lorelai's startled ones. For a moment, their world shrank to just the two of them. There were no words, just a raw, brutal understanding. They saw in each other's face the mirror of their own ruin. Hate, regret, and immense shame floated between them. Lorelei was the first to look away. Her face flushed with deep humiliation. She turned quickly, grabbed a dirty mop, and started cleaning the mess on the floor, her back trembling. To be humiliated in front of the man who had ruined her was a karma she couldn't bear. Orion just stood there. Strangely, he felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, not even satisfaction. He just saw the end of a sad story. The woman for whom he had chosen to give up Cassia was now worth less than a broken plate of food. He turned and walked away, leaving Lorelei to her own little hell. It started to rain. First a drizzle, then a downpour. Orion had no umbrella. He was soaked in seconds. He kept walking. He didn't care. The cold rain seeped through his thin clothes, making him shiver. He didn't know where he was going, but his feet, as if they had a memory of their own, led him back to his old neighborhood. The luxury neighborhood he had once dominated. He stood across the street from his old house. The house. But the house was glowing. Warm light spilled from every window. The garden, once rigid, was now lush and full of life. Even in the rain, it looked like a beacon of warmth. The Hawthorne Haven. Orion stood under the leaking awning of a bus stop, shivering in the dark. He looked across the street like a beggar peering into a banquet hall. A discreet black car pulled up to the gates. A car he recognized. Silas Kincaid got out of the driver's side and opened a large umbrella. Then the passenger door opened. Cassia stepped out. She was 10 years older, but she looked more serene, more elegant than ever. An ivory-colored scarf framed her peaceful face. She wasn't in a business suit, she wore a simple blouse and a long skirt. She smiled at Silas Kincaid. The front door opened from the inside. A group of small children ran out, laughing with joy, not caring about the rain. Aunt Cassia. Aunt Cassia's here. They ran and hugged her. Cassia laughed, a genuine, happy sound. She embraced the children as Silas Kincaid handed her a large box from the trunk. Careful, it's a warm chocolate cake, Cassia said to the kids, her voice carrying faintly across the quiet street. She went inside the house, surrounded by the laughter of children, shielded under Silas Kincaid's umbrella. The door opened, revealing a warm, vibrant interior, and then it closed, taking her back into her world of light. She never looked across the street. She never saw the drenched man shivering in the darkness. She never saw Orion Rhodes. To Cassia, Orion Rhodes didn't even exist. He had been completely erased from her life. Forgotten. Orion stared at the closed door. That was the end. Not the prison, not a miserable Lorelei, not the loss of money. This was his karma. To be erased. To be forgotten. To be nothing to the one person he should have treasured. The strength left his legs. Orion Rhodes, the once arrogant CFO, collapsed onto the wet, dirty pavement. He sat there in the dark, in the pouring rain, just across the street from the home that should have been his, now glowing with a life and happiness he could never touch. He had lost everything, precisely because he had gotten everything he wanted.